early 60s, an attorney in town here heard that Hayden Burns was running for governor. And Burns' primary planks were transportation and education. Anybody hear me okay? Seems like it. Good. And that attorney decided that was, those were exactly his objectives and what Central Florida needed. So he volunteered to be the chair in this area. Got a hold of the voter rolls, which hadn't really been readily available, but he was able to get those. And find the super voters and did a mailer with bumper stickers in it. Now, I mean, I got to get this whole story right, but the essence is with this. And they sent out a laudatory piece, marketing piece about Haywood Burns. So then they went to the retail places and looked for Burns bumper stickers and copied down the license plate number. Were able to access the information through DMV, kind of data mining, to get a hold of the name and address of the person who owned that car. And they enlisted their support as well with a nice laudatory piece about Burns, transportation, and education. It flipped the state. Burns won. And so he came to this person and he said, Charlie, you made it happen for me. What would you like? What can I do? And he said, well, I want you to get this guy on the state road board, and I'd like a state university. And so months later, they're talking, and he says, Governor Burns, you let me down. You didn't get my friend on the state road board. And he said, you don't know how hard it is to get a state university. FTU, UCF. It would not have happened without the guy that's going to join me up here. Come on, whenever you like. Welcome. And I want to thank our sponsors as well. Center State Bank was generous in providing their support, as was Colliers International, my firm. And I appreciate them. These programs don't happen without early money, and that's what you need. I guess there are outlines available, and we can run down through it. So let me give you a quick 4 or 5 minute multi-century history, and we'll talk with our esteemed guest here. Over the years, it's been clear transportation improvements drive growth and drive activity in this area. When the railroad came through, there were a few settlers down in Conway, and they built the Pine Castle down there. He was a writer from Cincinnati who would send his things out, and his words would get out. And when the railroad came through, all of a sudden they had activity going on there because the railroad was there. And what showed up was the settlement that is Pine Castle, and they had Pleasure Beach there, which was a 2-story structure where the skating and dancing took place on the 2nd floor, and 1st floor was reserved for church services and on non-Sundays some gambling, right? Then they had a dock leading way out into Lake Conway with a 2-story high board and a low board out there, and hotels and activity, and it was just really cooking in Pine Castle because transportation came that way. And risk takers built that infrastructure. The state of Florida trustees of the Internal Improvement Fund went broke one year because they guaranteed a whole bunch of rail lines. And a guy named Hamilton Diston came through. He bought 4 million acres for $1 million that made the state solvent, and he started digging his canals. But he got land from here to Belle Glade, a whole lot of land. So did Henry Flagler. He had land up and down the coast as an incentive to build there. This area was settled by people like Jernigan, who homesteaded land on Lake Holden, 160 acres, and others. And I want to take a moment here. There's so many strong women in this crowd. Can you imagine what a hard scrapple existence it would have been living with your husband or your man in 1890 or whenever?
It still is.
And I'm with you. It's a tough road to hoe, no question. And this county has been blessed by having some really strong women leaders here. We've known so many. But I want to pay tribute to the women who have been a big part of this history, even though the history books are pretty much male-dominated. It's just kind of the way it's been, but I think that's changing. When the railroad came down, places like Sanford, Longwood, Maitland, I represented a guy who had to come south. He went until the rail stopped. It was in Maitland. It was Mr. Waterhouse. So we built a house there on Lake Lily. The city still owns it. That's the kind of thing that occurred back before the turn of the century. And there were wars. The native tribes were here. They were all displaced, mostly by the Spanish, but the Seminoles had been driven here, and there was a fierce battle there, so a lot of acts of war in our history. Pre-26, there was a sales boom of lots, and people were buying their slice of paradise, and it was nuts. It was the land office business, and it all came crashing down when the hurricane came through in 26. There were a whole bunch of dead instruments in fine print that lawyers were working. But in that period of time, there were a number of different crops and other activities that were profitable here. Citrus, pineapple production. I talked with Judy Duda the other day. Those Slavs came here and settled all of Oviedo with row crops. And those were risk-taking pioneers that did real well. What really changed things was about the time this guy was born in World War II. Florida decided that military should have bases here because of the year-round weather. And so there was Mayport, there was Cecil Field. My dad was a Navy pilot. He flew out of Opelika. There was a Naval Air Station in Sanford, Green Cove Springs, DeLand. This was the Army Air Corps base. And so why don't we start with your relationship. There were so many veterans that got sand in their shoes, like my dad. Part of the reason I'm here is because he served here. But Charlie was born here. And so tell us a little bit about Paperboy days and Herndon Airport and that sort of thing. I love that story.
Well, I wasn't born during the... Can you hear me?
Not very well.
Can you hear me?
It's not on.
How do you turn it
The sound guy.
Where's Chris? Why don't you just take this?
on? I wasn't born during the... I wasn't born during the war. I was born during the Depression. Little difference. But... Takes care of that. It's not a job. I've seen a lot since then, and I went to the University of Florida. I got my law degree at the University of Florida, and you want me to just kind of tell the story?
Yeah, okay. I like that story about your interfacing as the paperboy with.
Okay, well, as a lot of us did, if you've lived here, very few natives here, I guess, but I was born in Leesburg. I moved to Orange County to Orlando in the 5th grade. I was in school at Delaney School. During the 5th grade, I was a paper boy. I went to the, what is now, it was the air base. I would sell papers in the morning and then sell papers in the afternoon during the summer, and then I got a paper route. That was something that allowed me to buy my own clothes, and I felt real good about that. But I did something bad. I was real good at throwing the paper, and there was this over and under apartment, I guess, and the people put their bottles up there, milk bottles that they had used, and I knew I could strike, and I knew a strike, and I did it one time, and I've always felt bad about that. But let me talk a little bit about some things that have happened that are of some moment here in this community. I saw Hayden Burns, the mayor of Jacksonville, talking on the bare stage, talking about what he thought the state needed was transportation and education. So I got a bunch of my buddies together and I chartered a bus. We put some beer in the back and went to Jacksonville and met with Hayden Burns and his wife Mildred. Pledged our lives, our fortunes, our secret honor, and $50 each. So he asked me to chair his Central Florida campaign. There were 6 candidates. He was the least expected to win. We did a campaign like this Central Florida had never seen before. And it carried him across, and he won. But he was on a 2-year term. They were trying to get it off of the governor's race. I'm trying to get it off the presidential race. So he had a 2-year term. And he said, you did a real good job chairing Doyle Connor's campaign for Commissioner of Agriculture in 1960. I said, well, Doyle's a dear friend of mine. You know, I called him after we won, and he wasn't expected to win. And I said, can you send me some legal work? He said, no, but I can give you a job if you come to Tallahassee. I said, hey, I still love him, but if he asked me to do something, I really wouldn't have time. Well, he had processed all this. So when he won, it was not expected, but he won. Central Florida carried him. He came to Orlando and he said, Charlie, what do you want? I said, I want a new university. So you got it. What else? I want a state road board member for my finance chairman, Dick Fletcher. You got it. What else? I want industrial development commission for Sonny Bishop. What else? State architect for Alan Arthur. What else? The longest term of the Board of Regents for Dr. Lou Murray. What? You got it. What else? And I went on. I didn't ask for anything myself. And that's when I saw in the paper where he had appointed a guy named Willard Peebles to the State Road Board. And I called him. I said, hey, what happened? You promised me that for my finance chairman. He said, Charlie, it's just not easy to get a new university. So I had to trade it. I went to the most powerful man in the legislature, the Speaker of the House, E.C. Rowell. He told me he would absolutely get you your university if I appointed his best friend, Willard Peebles. So I had to make the trade, and I told him that was a good trade. Fine. We got a university. But then...
It's the most wonderful institution now. We feel so fortunate. It's really put this place on the map.
It has. It's been the economic development engine for our community. And John Hitt has run it for 26 years as president, and I think he's the best president in the United States. We have a university that the culture and the strive for excellence and the strive for inclusion and diversity, and the 2x2 program where they take junior college, now state colleges, straight in. When they graduate with 2 years, they come to university, guaranteed entrance, has really worked very well. But what is most impressive to me is the athletic program that gives us the ability to tell the world what the university is. Our athletic program has the highest scholastic standing of any public university in the United States. It has a football team that averages 3.41 average scholastically. And I think that, and we got over 90% graduation rate in our football team. Well, it's not just that we won 13 games and we now say we're the national title holder. Everybody knows we're not the national title holder, but we will be one of these days. And we certainly showed them how to run the table. But that's right. And but the point is that gives everybody the understanding of what this university is about, the character, the strive for excellence, and the inclusion and everything else. So it's a story well told, and I'm very proud of the university.
Well, and we're proud of you as well. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
One of my first experiences here in Orlando was going to the Tangerine Bowl on New Year's Day. And they had just completed the upper deck, and my dad had seats in it. And so we took, I think there were 4 of us, and we were in the upper deck. First thing I noticed was that you couldn't see the near sideline. the thing was so poorly engineered, you're looking at the hash stripes. That's all the action you could see, nothing closer than that. And then, when they played my favorite song, Star Spangled Banner, everybody stood up and the whole thing shifted. And it was the spookiest feeling. And after the song was done, about a third of the people just ditched the upper deck. We stayed. And tell them about that.
I stayed just long enough to get off I stayed just long enough to get out of the stadium. Because it really was, you weren't sure it wasn't going to come down. But that led to something else. I knew I had a couple friends that had gone bankrupt in the hotel business because it was feast and famine. We didn't have a convention center, but I knew, and we all knew, we needed a convention center. But when the legislature passed the resort tax that said that we could have a local referendum for a resort tax, we could build a convention center. I saw that and I thought, wow, this is something that's going to be great for the community. Then we were in the cattle business, purebred Santa Cruz business, and there was a guy named Bob Graham, not the governor, Bob Graham Construction Company, who was also had a purebred Santa Cruz business.
Beautiful cows.
Beautiful cow. Yeah. But we were at a field day at his place, and he had a habit of drinking too much. And he called me. He said, I went over and said, I want to talk to you about something. He said, well, come on back up to the office. And so I went to the office with him, and he had another drink. And I said, Bob, I am really upset. He said, what are you upset about? I said, you built that stadium that swayed and had to be torn down. And I said, we've had too much of that kind of stuff in the community. They built a incinerator wouldn't burn, and he said, Charlie, I guarantee you, he said that I built it according to plans and specifications, but he said $1 million went under the table, but I didn't get any. I thought to myself, are we that sick? So
I understand $1 million in 1974, $5 is like 5 today, right? Big numbers.
In big numbers. Well, I was very upset, and I decided, I want to be sure we've got a convention center that's built right, and all the money goes in the ground. So I went to my good friend Larry Leckhart. He used to run Ronnie's. Some of y'all may remember that.
Legendary.
You're old enough.
Yeah, that's great.
He was on the Tourist Development Council. I said, I want to be attorney for the Tourist Development Council. He said, I'll get it done. He lobbied, and they hired me. And then I realized it wasn't going to happen there. It was going to happen at the county commission level. So I went to my good friend Alan Arthur, who I grew up with, straight arrow. He was chairman of the county commission. The rest of the county commission. Anyway, he said, you got to get 2 other votes. I did, and they hired me as county attorney. And I will tell you right now, there were attempts that I had to chop people's hands off. All the money went in the ground. The county had agreed to, they said that they wanted to get 60 acres, and who would give them 60 acres? They had four applicants, downtown Orlando, SeaWorld, Major Realty, which is the corner at the crossroads of I-4, and that didn't have an interchange, and Orlando Central Park. And I talked the county commission into putting each of those on a ballot, non-binding ballot, as to where we might have the convention center. And that brought all of the ones that had their sites in there out to vote on a non-election and normal election times, so an off election.
Yeah.
And we won by 64%, but trying to get a tax passed in Orange County is not easy, even if people didn't understand the church, they thought they were going to be taxed. But anyway, 64% we won, and so we got it done. I'll tell you that.
It's just a testament to this upstanding guy, though, that all of a sudden our politics today, and I'm in the business all the time, I never get shaken down. You just don't hear of corruption around here. We have great governance, and it didn't used to be that way, and this guy's a big part of that. I want to go back and tell a couple stories, because there's some good ones. There was a guy here in town, who was a pilot, and he happened to recognize the gentleman. He knew the name of the guy that he was flying around, right? And so he was especially interested in about 5,000 acres where Sand Lake Road and Shingle Creek are. Why don't you tell that story?
Well, the guy, Conway Kittredge, he was in real estate. Conway had a plane, and he would fly wherever he wanted to, but they asked him to fly this guy around to look at this property. Well, while he's flying, he finds out the story of what they're looking for.
It's Glenn L. Martin.
Yeah. And so when they bought, when they decided that's what they're going to buy, well, Conway knew that, so he got even more wealthy. But Conway was the kind of guy that would, he'd laugh, he had a great sense of humor, but he looked like he was half drunk most of the time because he was just that kind of person.
So anyway, he takes a briefcase. He knows who owns it. It's a Jewish gentleman in Miami. And on a Friday, he didn't really realize the culture, he took about 20 grand down there. That was the number I was told. Optioned the property. Okay? And so he controlled it. He had the right to assign it. And we don't know what he was paid for that contract. But the Martin Marietta Company ended up putting their plant there. And Orlando Central Park. And it's completely changed the whole character of that area because of the defense industry funds that went there. And I want to point out that the latest allocation of funds for missiles, Lockheed Martin just got $1 billion. And they're going to spend that money in Bethesda, Maryland, and here in Orange County.
And I didn't know anything about the suitcase or briefcase.
That's the story I heard, and the guy swore it was, he was a Boy Scout, and he swore it was true, so.
I was a Boy Scout, I never heard it.
It's a good story.
Yeah.
And my whole family exaggerates for effect, you know, and I'm talking about the law or money, you know, why not? So another story that's kind of interesting, Walt Disney. This guy had a lot to do with Disney, right? But on the day President Kennedy was assassinated, they were in Tampa and they were going to fly their plane to St. Louis. And on the way up, Walt, who had spent summers here because his mom's sister was a Lake County teacher, saw 2 new roads being built, I-4 and the Turnpike. So they get to St. Louis where they're going to put Epcot. And August Bush comes up to Disney. First, there was some story about it was told that he wasn't going to get a meeting with the guy because he didn't meet with carnies. Okay, that's how he characterized Disney. And then when they were face to face, he put his arm around him. Walt didn't like to be touched all that much, and kidded him about having a beer tap in Cinderella's castle. Well, on the way back to Anaheim in the plane, Walt, who didn't swear, cut loose with an F-bomb about August Bush, and when that went broke, Joe Louis swept in and bought that in distress. So you see the boom-bust cycle that happens in Florida, things really do change. Since this is my 5th recovery here, I'm real interested in what's around the corner, as I'm sure all of you are. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with Bill Frederick. I'm sure you guys were somewhat close, weren't you?
Yeah, Bill and I were great friends, yeah. I think you're talking about the magic?
Yeah.
Okay, well, here's what happened. Bill, a very good friend of mine, was not a good friend of Lou Treadway, who was chairman of the Orange County Commission. I was county attorney for Orange County. And I was a very good friend of Lou Treadway. He was in high school with me, and I had encouraged him to run for the county commission after he ran and lost in a legislative effort. And so I had done a lot of things to help Lou. Bill came to me and said, Charlie, we want to build an arena to attract a basketball team here to Florida, here to Orlando. And I'm trying to get $50 million of resort tax money, and it's 3-2 against me. I can't budge anybody. Can you help me? And I said, well, I'll try. So I went to Lou Treadway, and I said, Lou, we've been friends a long time. Yeah. I said, I've got a lot of chips. Yeah. I mean, a lot of chips. Yeah. well, I want you to do something for me. Sure, anything, what? I said, I can't tell you. I said, you can't tell me? I said, no, I can't tell you. I just want you to say yes. So he said, well, I said, just shake my hand and say yes. So we shook hands and said yes. And I want you to give your arch enemy, Bill Frederick, $50 million to build this Coliseum. He said, you do that to me? I said, I just did. I said, I want you over my office at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. And I had Bill over there. And I said, now, Bill, Lou's got something to tell you. Lou stood over like this. He wouldn't even look at him. And I said, what Lou wants to tell you is that he's going to change his vote and vote for your $50 million so you can build an arena and get a basketball team. And Lou is just like this. And I said, now y'all shake on it. And Lou is. And they shook on it. And he got his $50 million. We got an arena. And we got a basketball team.
How about that? Talk about making a difference here in Central Florida. I consider myself a reformed developer, but when I was a developer in the early 80s, I was the initial partner in Cypress Park, which is where Bent Oak is, and McCraney's had that huge presence currently. I did the first 32 acres and then oversaw the next 10 buildings with Danis. At the time, 441 was a dangerous, narrow, 4-lane, high-speed section. No turn lanes, no accel decel, and there were accidents. And the FDOT really wanted to dump some money in there, but it was right-of-way constrained. I think they only had 60 feet. So Charlie came to me, and he came to John Smith, who was running Lockheed Martin's Orlando Central Park. And the three of us just sat down and figured out that if you were a landowner, you'd like to have that landowner on 441, you'd like to have those improvements occur. And if you could be induced logically and get all your neighbors to do the same and donate the right-of-way, Charlie could, and FDOT could check the right-of-way box and we could get the money. So we came up with a scheme where if your piece was worth $1,000, you got $1,750 from the county. The assessed value was what we used per square foot. So if you're on the tax rolls at $1,000, you got a check for $1,750, and you conveyed your 18 feet or whatever the requirement was. We got the right-of-way box checked, and that road was built. It would have taken another decade if they'd had to go through the whole condemnation process, and we leaked over a whole bunch of different projects. That was this guy kind of catalyzing that, and then a bunch of effort by a lot of different people. I really thought that was pretty memorable. I invited Linda Chapin. She had a conflict, but I wanted to kind of spend a minute and talk about, again, the strong women that have been active and made a real difference in this town. One of my favorite stories is about Vera Carter, and many people in my industry weren't all that crazy about her. But she was driving down Conroy Windermere Road, saw somebody building their garage in what she knew was lake bottom, right? And so she stopped and said, idiots, it's going to flood. And it got her so riled up, she then volunteered for the P&Z, I think, and became involved in politics. Well, when the ridge froze in 80 and especially in 83, she just saw a sprawl occurring there unless growth was managed. And so by that time, she had been elected to the county commission and really instituted some fine planning principles all throughout Horizon West, creating villages and trying to set aside land for employment and for retail and non-residential uses. I'm sure you had some involvement out there, although we have not talked much at all about that.
Yeah, Vera was a fine person, and she was a very strong environmentalist. She hired as our county planning director, Jim Sullivan.
Yep.
And Jim and I fought and fought because I had an idea that we shouldn't have an urban service line. We ought to have everything controlled by economics. If you really wanted to build far out, that's fine, but you had to pay to bring all the services out there, and the cost would be so prohibitive to build an enclosed I always feel like economics can control things rather than regulations, to some extent anyway. So we had that little fight. Jim and I became great friends, and we are still very good friends. And Vera did a lot of good things for the county.
No doubt. Let's talk a minute about Glenda Chapin. I was a real estate broker, still am, and had the distinct pleasure of representing Sally. Sarah Smith McElroy Butt was her name. She owned land at Holden Avenue, the railroad tracks, a nice grove with frontage on Lake Jessamine. And I was teeing it up for development. I came to Linda, who at the time was the commission chairman for that district, and I said, this is going to be developed unless we can create a park there, but they're going to want the same amount of money. I said, here's the number. She said, give me 30 days. And it may have taken a little longer than that, but Cypress Grove Park was the result of it. It's one of the finest park facilities around. It really is. And I was riding my bike out there 6 months ago or so, and there were some gents on a Sunday morning playing cricket. Cricket, thank you. I have no idea how you play that game, but that's evidence of the remelting pot that we have here and a really nice provision of a public amenity that would accommodate that.
Yeah, actually, Linda Chapin did a wonderful job as chairman of Orange County. I was one of her first supporters to get out there and work for her because I thought she would do a good job. She built the Orange County Courthouse, which, you know, it was a tough job to get everybody together. Everybody was running in different directions, but she got it all done. And there's some things in the courthouse that I'd like to see changed, but nonetheless, it's built and it works. And she's responsible for that.
I remember driving in from the west on the East-West Expressway with my dad, who just loved this town, and the sun was not quite setting, but it was behind us, so the whole skyline, as we got near the Citrus Bowl or Camping World Stadium, was lit up. And he pointed out what a nice venue that was of our beautiful city, but he also pointed out how the courthouse was probably his favorite building here. And he had a lot of architectural chops. I grew up with the kids of famous architects who happened to be his buddies, like Errol Saarinen and Yamasaki and a number of others. It was really pretty interesting. But that was his favorite building here in town. Another staunch woman in politics here is Glenda Hood. I really enjoyed working with her on the I-4 Association. At the time, Ben Watts, the Secretary of Transportation, thought 3 lanes was plenty in each direction on I-4. And we said, no, you need slip ramps, you need a whole bunch of more on and off improvements because it's the spine. And we fought and eventually got them to scrap that idea of improving it with only 3 lanes through the center of town.
Glenda Hood was an excellent mayor. She's still very involved in community stuff. She's just like that bloody battery that doesn't run down. She keeps going. And she's very effective. She I think, was one of our better mayors of Orlando.
I'm active in the YMCA on the development committee, and years ago when Randy Lyons and Sunley were doing Lake Nona, we really wanted a YMCA out in that area, and they were going to be developing North Park and thought the YMCA would be a really good impetus for selling homes and catalyze sales. And so we were talking about trying to co-locate a school and a YMCA, kind of a revolutionary concept. And we were really struggling with insurance issues and on and on and on. Glenda put Randy Lyons, the head of the Orange County Public School System, the head of the YMCA, together in a room and said, we'll have sandwiches, we'll have dinner, whatever you like, but you're not leaving to go home until we cut a deal. And it took all day, but North Lake Park and the YMCA Family Center there is just a signal success. And it's due to her just perspicacity to make it happen. I always admire that. You've had a lot of involvement with roads, and one of my favorite people before he passed away was Jim Green. Why don't you talk a little bit about the Orange Orlando Expressway Authority?
Well, when Hayden did not appoint Dick Fletcher, State Road Board member, we reorganized the Orlando Orange County Expressway Authority, because when Hayden came down, the second thing I asked him after university was, we need an east-west expressway. He said, you got it. So we put Dick as chairman of the Orlando Orange County Expressway Authority, and the first thing he did was he built the beeline over to Brevard County. The next thing he did was he started on the east-west expressway. He withstood the slings and arrows of all the property owners, the homeowners and everything that he had to disrupt, and with eminent domain all the way across Orange County. He got everything ready to push the button, and the governor changed to Reuben Askew. Reuben's a good friend of mine. He's dead now, but that's another story. But Reuben appointed Jim Green to be chairman of the Orlando Orange County Expressway Authority. And so Jim pushed the button, and the east-west expressway came into being. But what Jim's main contribution was, he planned the Greenway, the Beltway, all the way around the county. He stood with that thing, and it really was a boon to everybody. I use it all the time.
Yeah. Well, it's an example of the intergovernmental cooperation that we're so beneficial. We benefit so much from. Years ago, before we had the Industrial Development Commission, there was a group called the Dirty 30, and I knew some of those people. I'm sure Fletcher was in there and a number of others. Craig Linton Sr., who I worked with. And then that kind of morphed into the IDC, the Industrial Development Commission. And then that became the Economic Development Commission, and now it's the Orlando Partnership. But we had a conversation today that just floored me. He wanted to talk about Campus Crusade for Christ. And I said, whoa, time out. I got the first comment there. Rick Tesh, who was running the EDC with, I think Roy Harris might have still been there, but Rick said, Trevor, we're flying a guy around in a helicopter today. He's interested in looking at Orlando as a possible headquarter location. You know the land. Will you fly with him? And I said, sure, I will. So and at the time we had a relationship with Paula Henson. And so we were flying, and we got out by Lake Hart, and I said, this is a beautiful piece of property right here. I mean, it's full sales mode, right? And she only wants X per acre. And he says, well, we're hoping to get it for free. Just donate it to our charitable operation. And I quickly did the math on the commission on a sale. It's free. Contingent fee, you could guarantee my fee and it's still no money. And so I said, well, and then I just happened to think, I said, perhaps Mr. Bradshaw owns this whole North Shore here, and he may have an incentive in doing a charitable donation. So then you got the word at the time.
Let me carry it there. It unrelated to that. What happened was the day before, or the day you flew him, as a matter of fact, there was a big meeting. The chamber put a whole big meeting together and said, and he was he was the honored guest, and they asked him, what are you doing here? He said, I'm looking, I'm visiting people. Well, I understand you're looking for new world headquarters. And he said, I am. Well, where are you looking? He said, I'm looking at Memphis and Charlotte and several other places. Are you looking here? He said, no. So what would it take for you to think, to consider Orlando? And a little sparkle in his eye, he said, well, if this community committed to raise the $35 million I need to build the world headquarters, I'd consider it. I'm sitting there saying, this community doesn't have $35 million to myself. But at the end of the table, up stands
Pat Williams?
Pat Williams. Pat Williams stands up and says, Dr. Bright, we commit that we will raise the $35 million for you. And I'm saying, well, I guess he's close to the DeVos family. Maybe he knows something I don't know. But anyway, he was very excited about that. Then Rick Tesh, who was my executive director, I was chairman of the EDC, came over and says, I'd like to take Dr. Bright around and show him Orange County. And I said, fine. That's the last I heard of that until the next day. Rick comes into me and said, Dr. Bright is in love with Lake Hart. He said if he could get 250 acres on Lake Hart, he'd make his world headquarters here. Well, that same day, that was in the morning, that same day at noon, I was at the Citrus Club, and I saw my old high school drinking buddy Bradshaw, Charles Bradshaw Jr. We raised a little hell back in high school together. We've been
OHS, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And we were good friends, and so I went over and I said, buddy, when you finish lunch, I want to talk to you. So he came over, I got a table off to our side, and I said, buddy, have you ever heard of Dr. Bill Bright? He said, no. I said, have you ever heard of Campus Crusade for Christ? He said, no. I said, well, here's the situation. We've got a wonderful opportunity to have them locate their world headquarters here, and he needs to have 250 acres on Lake Hart. And I want to ask you if you'll give it. He looked at me, he said, give? I said, yes. He said, why would I do that? I said, I know you, buddy, and I'll tell you, when you get up there, the pearly gates, you're going to need an advocate. He looked at me, he said, Charlie, have you gone crazy? I said, no, I'm not crazy. He said, well, why would I do that? I said, well, first of all, you got all the land around Lake Hart. You're outside the urban service area. You'll never get it approved for development. But if you give me 25 acres for Dr. Bright,
250.
250 acres for Dr. Bright, I'll get it approved with a DRI, and you can then develop out from that. I'll break that, open that can. And he said, you can do that? I said, you know I can. He said, okay. I said, shake on it. So we shook. I called Dr. Bright, and I said, Dr. Bright, I have your 250 acres on Lake Hart. You got to go pick it. And he announced that afternoon that the world headquarters for Campus Crusade for Christ was going to be there. And the sad part of it is that Buddy had mortgaged that property for $5 million. And the bank, for some reason, called it, said, we want our $5 million. And we have a buyer who will buy it at $5 million. And so we're calling the note now. You can either have us go through foreclosure, or you can give us a deed in lieu of foreclosure. He says, I'll give you a deed in lieu of foreclosure. I don't want to go through foreclosure, but on one condition. You've got to release the 250 acres that Dr. Bright wants, and I'm going to give him a deed, and then I'll give you the rest of it. I said, okay. And that's how Campus Crusade for Christ got
That's how you get things done.
Yeah.
And it's because people believe in your integrity and you saw the handshake. That's all it took. All it takes with this guy. You won't find a detractor, to my knowledge. It's just one of those things. And I think you've really helped bring about the intergovernmental cooperation that we benefit from so much here. You look at the efforts of Jacob Stewart and myregion.org and the planning effort that's going on, and the fact that we now have Osceola County in CFX, Central Florida Expressway Authority, building roads all over the place. I mean, they're talking about another 40 miles through Southport and over to Poinciana. That's just the sort of thing that really stimulates land values and activity. And though as a real estate guy, I gotta say, I want to hear more talk about conservation. You hear about protecting this or this and that, but we live over one of the most immense water bodies in the Florida aquifer, and we're right at capacity right now. If we don't start conserving, I think that might be what's around the corner. An issue like that could really stall this recovery and the activity that we all enjoy. I'm pretty much out of comments that I wanted to make. And I wondered if anybody has a question in the crowd, or if there's anything else you'd like to kind of try to close with here, Charlie.
Well, we're talking about downtown and things like that. A guy named Bill Davis sold three of us the Metcalf building. And we didn't have any cash in it, just all paper, because that was the time when you could shoot a cannonball down Orange Avenue, would hit anybody. We were in one of those recessions. So we bought it. And we remodeled one of the floors. And then I saw in the paper where Florida Ranchlands was going to put Disney in their building, which was that was the building,
Rutland building?
Rutland building. And I called Don Tatum with Disney and I said, wait a minute. I said, I've got a building I want to show you. So they said, well, we'd like to see any building you've got. So they came and I showed them the Metcalf building, and they said, we want to go in your building. So Florida, Nelson Boyce is a good friend of mine.
But you guys crossed swords numerous times.
That's right.
Yeah. And Disney also tried to sell you the northeast quadrant of I-4 and 192.
No, they didn't try to sell it to me. What happened was, when the land purchases were over, Paul Helliwell called me and said that Roy Hawkins is Disney's land guy, and he wanted to have lunch with me. And so we had lunch at the Howard Johnson down on OBT. That was before OBT became OBT. So we had lunch down there, and they said, Charlie, you really helped us, and you kept the word, you kept everything secret. So we want you to be the first to know where the entrance to Disney is. They pulled out this big map and showed me everything. And they said the entrance to Disney is going to be at the intersection of State Road 530 and I-4. Well, 530 subsequently became 192. And I said, wow. I said, we bought 3 quadrants. And the 4th quadrant is, we want you to have the opportunity to buy that 4th quadrant before anybody knows where anything is. I said, wow. I got a couple of buddies of mine together. We went to Anaheim to find out what happened to the property value, and it was absolutely fantastic. But I came back and I couldn't figure out what I could put outside 27,000 acres that they couldn't put inside 27,000 acres. So this is 1965, and I just decided I wasn't going to do that. So I didn't do it. And the people that did buy it, once the announcement was out, they bought it. They went bankrupt.
Carol Lando, group out of...
Carol Lando. And what happened was Disney didn't open until 1971.
That's right.
And the impact really didn't hit until 77. That's when I became county attorney. And so I dodged that bullet. But it was very tempting to try to put together a group to buy it.
Yeah, this place has really had a land office business on occasion. John Tomlinson.
Charlie, can you talk about the political machinations that went on in the formation of the Reedy Creek Improvement District and the governor?
Well, that was handled primarily by Bob Elrod. Bob Elrod was a senator from Winter Garden, actually, it was out in West Orange County. And Bob did a masterful job in getting it through the legislature, but they wanted everything. They wanted to control everything, which they do.
Yeah.
And
that's when they got 3 municipalities and Reedy Creek Improvement District.
You bet. It's incredible.
Yeah.
But Bob is entitled to all the accolades for getting that done. It was a tough job to get it through. And I didn't have anything to do with the legislation. I was on the executive side getting roads and whatever they needed.
I was talking with a relative of, or a descendant of Billy Dial, and one of the stories I heard was that they were nearly complete with the purchase, and some gentlemen of the Jewish faith found out what was going on and got a key piece right by Bay Lake, and Disney had to have it, and it wasn't going to be available. And so Billy Dial and Nelson Boyce went to the real power broker back then in the mid-'60s, who was Martin Anderson at the Sentinel. And they pleaded their case about the mystery industry, and they had to be able to buy this last piece. Sure enough, a couple of days later, the gentlemen that owned that were willing at doubling again the price, but they were actually willing to sell. And that's sort of how you got things done back then. And Billy Dial was such a force here. He did not want the new expressway, I-4, to go way west of town, which is where they were going to put it. Over.
And I did, and I fought it, and I lost.
But it was well wagered.
Hey, Trev.
Jason?
Yeah, so there's always been stories, at least that I'm aware of the land for Disney being purchased by strawmen, maybe it was covertly. No one knew Disney was buying this land. Can you give us a little background to that? Is this true?
That's true, and they had 3 or 4 different entities that they all controlled, and they had different agents at Florida Ranch Lands, and they were trying to look like cattlemen and lease pasture with an option to purchase. That was a largely used vehicle in all of that. And there were Dave Newspickle, Chuck Bosserman, Nelson Boyce, Craig Linton Sr., Jim Morgan. Those were the agents that really did all of that field work.
And those guys are really strong too.
Yeah, they were all terrific gentlemen, and I had the benefit of being mentored by them, and it was something. They run business.
Trev.
Yes, Therese.
Charlie, I'm so thrilled that you're here, and I'm from Orlando, I grew up here, I've never lived anywhere else in my life, so I love to hear the history of Orlando and how we grew. So thank you very much for being here. But my question is, in today's world, do we have a Charlie? I mean, what's happening in Orlando? Is it still a handshake society? I mean, how are we creating a space in Orlando without the good old boys and their handshake? So that's probably
It's a really good question.
So I want to tell you right now that I am very proud of the leadership we have. Let me start with, you've got to bring the community together. And we have been fortunate to have a guy named Jacob Stewart that really has a facility to do that. He has brought the community together. He's kept the community together, going in the same direction. Can't say enough good about him. But you have individuals also in this community that are really out there doing good things that you don't even know about. And I could reel off a lot of names, which I guess I will. Tom Cinema, you got Jim Sinnott,
Yeah.
you got Eddie Morton. You maybe don't know him, but he is a great guy. They're doing a lot of work to help the homeless and a lot of that kind of thing that's going on that really hasn't been trumpeted, but it's happening. And you've got a great mayor and Buddy Dyer.
We really do. I'm an Orlando resident, and it's just, I live in College Park, and it's just such a healthy climate in that part of Orlando, and such steady leadership and inspired leadership. We are so fortunate to have him continuing as mayor, in my opinion.
We do. We've got some really strong people, and they got their heads screwed on right, and they're honest people, and I think we've been very fortunate.
I agree with that. Well, I think we're going to wrap this up. How about a round of